Today we're talking about how empaths get into relationships with assholes and how they can get out of them as well. I'm talking about all the little ways we show up as empaths and intuitives that work fantastic when we're in healthy relationships. But if we're not careful and we don't filter out somebody who's not good for us, our good habits can actually turn toxic and make our relationships more counterproductive when we've selected the wrong person. So to give an overview of this, I'm going to start with our childhoods and how we pick up these patterns in the first place. Then I'm going to move on to how we form beliefs about our relationships based on our experiences, which are not accurate and not filtered correctly. And then I'm going to talk about how we can conquer those beliefs by taking different steps and different actions with a lot of self-discipline to get us out of these toxic relationships. So first of all, our relationships come from our old habits from when we're children. Quite often there's some influence there, even if it's a subtle one, even if we think we've worked on ourselves before and we were aware of our childhood patterns, we may not have been completely 100% aware. Spiritually minded people often do work on themselves, and they often have developed discipline in certain areas of their life, which is very beneficial in the areas of life where they work. But some areas of life almost require an opposite approach to the areas of life where we see success. For example, our professional and business areas of life can require some very different skills than ones that we need to employ in our personal lives. Some areas they do cross over, but others they don't. And sometimes we need to have opposing tactics as well, where when we evaluate we're with one type of person, we behave one very specific way, but then when we evaluate we're with a different type of person, we need to behave very differently. And so I'll go into this in a bit more detail, but I'll start with how we develop patterns in the first place and negative beliefs about relationships. And it comes from the time when we're children. So when we're children, we may have very difficult parents or teachers or caregivers in our lives that have made us behave the way that we do as empaths and intuitives. And those behaviors get shaped because as children, we can't really acknowledge that an adult is a bad person, at least not one that is immediately caring for us. If we acknowledge them as a bad person, it's so scary for our belief system as children because we understand that we may not be taken care of. We may not receive what we need if we truly believe that the adults who are taking care of us are bad people, which is a very terrifying thought. And so most children can't really go there or conceive of that. And the way that they cope with a difficult parent or a difficult teacher or sibling or classmate is that they blame themselves for whatever problem is going on rather than label the relationship as what it is, toxic. And so what happens is that the children finds ways of adapting to this toxic relationship by giving more. So they may do more acts of service around the house for the parent that's difficult, or they may work harder on their homework for the teacher that is giving them a hard time. Or if there's a classmate who wants them to become more popular, they may choose to wear a specific kind of clothing label in order to gain that popularity, instead of standing up for themselves and being true to their authentic selves and settling for the consequences of that. They'd rather settle by changing who they are. And we all do this to some extent. But with empaths, we're really concerned with the approval of others, especially when we're children, if we haven't healed those patterns that we've developed in childhood. And when we're of service to others, often that pattern really works well for us. It's an excellent strategy when we are in healthy relationships. When we belong to a nice family, Clearing the dishes and sweeping and keeping the house clean is a wonderful act of service that we can do for our family to help things run more smoothly. However, when we're expected to do it in a toxic manner and these priorities are not evenly distributed among the family, that's when they can actually have a negative effect when you perform them for your family. And it's the same in school. When one teacher is favoring a student over another, having the student they don't favor work harder to gain their approval often backfires. But children don't really acknowledge or understand this most of the time when they're growing up. They're taught that they have to behave and comply. If they don't, then they often see the consequences of going to the principal's office or getting suspended. And so they feel trapped. They have to try harder to please the adult that's in the room. And if they don't, there will be some terrible consequence. And we forget when we grow up as an adult that we actually have more power over our lives. We don't really have to go after anyone's approval, even our boss's approval. We can choose to do the work that we want to do out of service, but then have no attachment to what our bosses or coworkers think of us. So that's why we get into relationships with assholes. We care too much about what they think, and we have too much need to be in that relationship rather than take care of our own needs, which helps me move on to the next point. Sometimes we're trying to get a need met by somebody who we're in that toxic relationship with. Like, we need them to listen to us, or we need them to be available 24/7 either on their phone or in person, or we need them to promise to us a future that we feel is a secure future. When we have those needs and we place them on others instead of building those secure futures for ourselves, or being available to yourself when you're feeling insecure instead of trying to turn that need onto another person, what happens is that eventually we're going to become disappointed. And that's why I'm not the biggest fan of fairy tales, because they imply that we can take our needs and place them on other people, and they will automatically understand and reciprocate those needs, when that's really a myth in real life relationships and it's not true. So what we need to do instead is solve those needs for ourselves rather than placing them on other people who aren't nice to us. Now, the other reason why people place their needs onto other people and they keep falling into toxic relationships over and over and over again, and intuitive empathic people fall into this too, is that they get a little thrill or a little high in chasing and trying to get that unachievable person. It can be a pattern that we formed in childhood, especially if we had very difficult authority figures in our lives, such as parents or teachers, that we could never win the approval of. Then we start repeating that pattern as adults when we're trying to win over a potential partner. We just keep trying and trying over and over again, and we fall for the difficult partner rather than the healthy partner, because we're getting a thrill out of chasing them. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting a thrill from chasing in some other areas of our life. It makes sense, like when we're chasing success or potentially chasing a healthy goal that we're trying to achieve in terms of fitness level, or maybe it's a degree after our name. Some of those pursuits are actually not bad. They're healthy for us, and they're good ways for us to grow and to stretch our capabilities. However, when it's a relationship, the whole purpose of a relationship is you're supposed to be loved for who you are. So it doesn't work when you try to apply these tactics to your personal relationships. And a lot of women I see get kind of addicted to this pattern of chasing, and it doesn't work very well. It's much better to be calm and relaxed and meet your needs yourself rather than chase somebody else to have your needs met. And in life, if you really want to escape your relationships that are toxic, it's kind of like giving up a habit like smoking. It can be very addictive. And so you may need to do something else temporarily to get yourself over the hump of getting over that toxic habit. You know, sometimes smokers, when they're quitting, will become overeaters instead, right? Because they need to fall back on another habit in order to get them over the hump of conquering that initial bad habit. And sometimes I think that's actually practical. Maybe you need to replace one bad habit with a slightly less bad habit until that old bad habit is completely healed. But if you can go cold turkey and just push yourself into that happy, healthy life without that toxic relationship, like maybe you focus on your fitness instead, or building a business, or working on a new job that makes you really happy, then that's probably going to push you more quickly into your happy, healthy future as an intuitive empath. But for some, maybe they need to fall back on another habit. Maybe you need to call up your girlfriends and bitch and complain, you know? Maybe it's better than calling up your ex, although it's not perfect. But whatever steps you take, as long as you know you're moving forward and taking progress, whether you're taking that baby step or that big giant leap into your happy, healthy future, at least you know that you're making progress. I think there are many different ways to tackle a problem, and sometimes we need bite-sized steps, and sometimes we really need to push ourselves to take the big leap in life and make a big change. Regardless of how you decide to do it, I support you either way, and I hope that you find a tactic that works for you to get yourself out of these toxic relationships. Maybe instead of cutting the person off, if they're a family member, you know, and you need to have them in your life for whatever reason, or maybe they're a partner and you have children and you can't get divorced that easily because your children are under age 18, then maybe you take the baby steps. Maybe you learn how to have less intimate conversations with that challenging partner by talking about the weather or how their work is going, rather than diving deep into your own emotional vulnerabilities. Maybe that baby step could be that you meet some new friends and you spend time with them in healthy and productive ways outside your home. And that gives you some meaning and purpose in your life without you having to radically overhaul or change your life. But for others, really the only escape from their toxic relationship will be to cut the relationship out of their lives and to take that big leap for themselves. But regardless of whichever direction you go, there's no right or wrong here. Relationships can be challenging, and especially if you've chosen to marry somebody and then they turned out to not be a nice person, it's not always easy finding the appropriate solution in order to cope with them. And that's why when you're dating, taking it slow and selecting the right partner is so important. So I hope you enjoyed my class today about how to get out of toxic relationships. I've only given you a few strategies in this video here, but as intuitive people, because we do come from such difficult backgrounds and we have such big open hearts and we long to be generous with others, sometimes that makes us prone to be in these toxic relationships. And while it's a discipline to be generous and loving towards others, sometimes we have to counterbalance that with a discipline of being selective and setting boundaries with people who are not good for us. And whether we do that in big or little ways, we can all hold hands and walk forward together towards our happy and healthier future. I hope you're all having an amazing week, and take care. Bye now.